everybody. Welcome to the Morbidly Curious Book Club. My name is Patricia. I am the owner and host of the Morbidly Curious Book Club. Thank you for being here so much. Please let me know in the comments wherever you are watching, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, if this is your first time. I love to hear that. And also, we already got some people saying where they are in the comments, so tell us where you're at in the world. So we recently transitioned over to a live show format. So welcome to the live show. I'm joined here with some amazing Morbidly Curious people, and I will introduce them here in just a second. They will actually, I'll have y'all introduce yourselves because you guys have some really cool jobs that I want you to mention. So thank you for being here. This is our April discussion of Waco Rising by Kevin Cook, David Koresh, the FBI, and the birth of America's modern militias. I've only said that 75 times this month, but for some reason I said David Koresh, the FBI, and the birth of America's modern militias. Before we get started, of course, I have to mention, can't put a spoiler warning on history, but we will be discussing the book, at length. So if you did not read it, you're still welcome to come hang out and listen to the discussion, but we will be discussing it from cover to cover. So I do warn you about that just in case, but I do, even in the chapter meetings, I always welcome people to come and hang out, even if you haven't read it. A couple things about the Morbidly Curious Book Club. I'll put the website here in the chat so you guys see that. You see a bunch of fun stuff on there. So we have a book box subscription service now, where I teamed up with a local bookstore, Fred and June's in Mooresville, North Carolina, where they prepare the books for us in a box every month to get sent right to your doorstep. And that comes with goodies from the publisher, which typically includes, it has for every book so far, signed book plate. And if they have any leftover bookmarks and whatnot, they'll throw those in there. Don't think we've gotten any of those yet, but if they have anything else from the PR packets, they'll throw those in there. And shout out to my friend Annalise out of Charlotte. She puts together the bookmarks that you get in your boxes, and of course the stickers that you can put on your book. They do not come pre-put on the book. You can put those on yourselves if you would like to. So we have that. So if you would like the convenience of having the book sent right to your doorstep, you can. Some of the months where we have paperback books only, such as our May book, you get 2 books in your box. And as you guys probably saw, which we can discuss later, the bonus book in our May box was super, super fun. Also, I have a podcast where I talk with the authors every month, and I had a wonderful conversation with Kevin Cook, the author of this book that we are reading here today, or discussing here today. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him. This is one of my favorite topics to touch on. Religion, cults, whatnot in general is one of my favorites, and Waco I think about all the time. So this was a great, I think, book pick. If I can toot my own horn, I'll say that. I really enjoyed this one, but it was a great conversation with Kevin Cook. So I implore you to go check that out. That is available wherever you listen to podcasts. It's Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever you feel like listening and supporting. And while you're there, if you want to give me a rating and a review, that would be much appreciated. What else we got? We got t-shirts. I mentioned chapters as well. If you would like to attend a local chapter, see if there's any available in your city. And if you want to start one, there's a form to fill out. I am slightly behind on the forms. I have received a couple of emails where people are like, hey, I submitted a form. I do apologize. I'm catching up on that I was going to say this coming weekend. It is a weekend, isn't it? Okay, so I guess Monday. Tomorrow I will be catching up on the form inquiries. Is that all I have to say? Let me know if you have any questions. The chat is open. I am also monitoring Instagram. I'm kind of going back and forth here because Instagram's a little finicky with StreamYard, but I do have it open. So if you comment, I will see it. Hopefully. But yeah, Facebook, YouTube, let me know if you guys have any questions. If you want to say hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Mike. We're in Olive Branch, Mississippi. Love. Hello. So I can pop up your comments and questions. Oh, first month with the book club. Welcome. Don't let us scare you away. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I super appreciate you. Hello. We see some previous people that we had on the live show previously. Okay, let's get into it. I want to introduce you to this fabulous panel of people that I have here. If you guys don't mind just introducing yourselves. And I know we talked about in our practice run, telling us a little bit about what you do for work and how you can tie that into the book's discussion. So if you'd like to bring that up, you certainly can. Take it away, Kelsey.
Perfect. Well, my name is Kelsey. I am a mental health therapist based in central Iowa. So that kind of leads think Steph and I talked a little bit about it before, just some connections with kind of mentalities, why people can become susceptible to cults or why they're so alluring or why they've kind of got the power they do. And then just I'm obsessed with cults and Waco and all of those things because I am a white girl who loves true crime. So
yes, of course. Thank you for being here, Nora.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora. I'm in the DC area. I am a hazard and disaster historian who looks at the events themselves as well as their impacts on infrastructure, culture, and society. I look at natural and human-made disasters, and Waco is what we would consider a human-made disaster. So while it is not one of the events that I have spent years studying, I'm very familiar with it, and I love true crime, but I tend to lean to the ones that go badly.
Yes.
Just because of what I study.
Yes. Love. Steph?
Hi, I'm Steph. I am a social worker by training. I work in hospice care, which does not really relate to this, but I also do research into death, dying, grief, and palliative care, which does kind of relate to this in terms of how people, like Kelsey said, the psyche of kind of everyone. I do also have a psychology degree. So the psyche of everyone and kind of the susceptibility of cults. And then also kind of how that carries through with everybody using the tragedy of Waco and the death of the Branch Davidians as kind of like a rallying cry into right-wing militias. So that's kind of how I come to this. And I am from Ontario, Canada.
Love. Alyssa. Hello. First time on a show with Girls Who-
Yeah. Long time listener, first time caller, and all that. My name is Alyssa, and I am an elementary school librarian, which definitely has nothing to do with Waco, but a lot to do with books.
Where are you located?
I am in the great state of Texas.
Yes.
Just a scant 2 hours away from the events of our book.
Yes. Listen, I was thinking about that too. Like when everybody's talking about their cool jobs, I'm like, I'm Patricia. I work in marketing. I'm in the wrong room. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Tam. Welcome
Hello,
back.
I'm Tam. I host the Los Angeles chapter of the Morbidly Curious Book Club. Please, if you're in the area, come and see us. We would love to have you. We have all of our meetings at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, so that is a gorgeous location. Please join us. My work has absolutely nothing to do with Waco or this book. I work in a sector of finance, so just not interesting at all, but I wanted to jump on this because I find Waco super interesting, so I'm excited to get into this.
Love it. Doesn't have to do with Waco, but it is fascinating. We do have like,
yeah.
50% of us here like really could get into the
You
weeds
mentioned
of it.
cool jobs, and I was like, not me.
Hollywood Forever is beautiful. Yes, if you are in the LA area. Oh my God, was that my? Did that beep on my end or was that on y'all's? Because it sounded like my fridge was open. Okay, good.
My girlfriend was outside and just came back inside, and that was the door beeping.
No, you're good.
Open.
For a second there, that was like, because I opened the fridge earlier and I was like, did I leave that shit open? Anyway, you're good. 50% of us here definitely can contribute some really interesting stuff, and I think the other 50 are just here to get mad, which is perfectly valid.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here to get mad.
Love it. And from the Toronto
thanks
chapter,
for the,
yes.
For the shout out, Mike. Appreciate that.
Oh yeah. Love. We have a couple different chapter goers here as well. I host some in like the greater Charlotte area of North Carolina. So if you're in Charlotte, Belmont, or Mooresville, that's where I host. And of course, we got Los Angeles. We got the Toronto chapter here as well. Also, shout out to Kenya, who's in, is it Tacoma? I think it's Tacoma. She found the golden ticket for the indie bookstore. The Libro FM golden ticket where you get a year of audiobooks. She found it at her local store. So they posted a picture of her and gave her a shout out to the chapter that she runs. And yes, Cam, you saw her, I believe last month. Yeah. For the gory details discussion. She does the triangle chapter. Yes. Confused. It's going to be a roller coaster. Yes, it is. So let's dive in to how angry this book made us. First and foremost, please, yes, Perla does our West Seattle chapter. Love, thank you guys for showing up. Thank you guys for being here. Let's just get into our overall thoughts. Let's go in order here. So we got Kelsey, Nora, Steph, Alyssa, and Tam. Just go in order. What'd you rate it? Overall thoughts, yay, nay, would you recommend it? Structure, all the things. Tell me what you thought of this book.
Perfect. I, with some others I think I've talked to, it was like a 5 out of 5. I don't think it was particularly like sensational, but I also think it was super well laid out. Like I very much thought the structure from like kind of Vernon Howe becoming Koresh, kind of the infighting in the Davidians initially, the standoff, and then kind of the implications of that through just like fit really well in the structure of the book. I would absolutely recommend it to anyone who is interested in Waco, who just has a lot of feelings about the FBI, because I think we all have a lot of feelings about the American government.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And also just for anyone, and I think it's going to be a like question we talk about later, but just learning more about, because I think I learned way more about the Branch Davidian side of things in this than I think I knew kind of coming in. And I think some of my thoughts shifted on that end of things throughout my reading of it. So
let me know in the chat too what you rated it, but that's a good point too. Would you recommend this to somebody? So thank you for adding that too. Yeah, would you recommend it to somebody? Nora.
I rated it a 5 out of 5. I think this book is amazing. I've already recommended it to a lot of people. I think narrative nonfiction is a really great way to talk about tragedy and disasters. The academic manuscripts are needed to kind of really dig into it, but I think that if you're trying to talking about an event and kind of get it out there to people that may not be familiar with certain aspects of it, the way Kevin Cook wrote in this narrative nonfiction fashion really works. I kind of refer to books like this as a biography of an event. He didn't come in with a side. He didn't come in with a bias. He really just said like, hey, this is the beginning, middle, and end of this event. This is how it happened. And, you know, there are biographies on Koresh, and there are lots of books and documentaries on Waco that take sides. And I think having one that really just kind of lays out what's there is needed for an event like this. As Steph said, it's kind of the launching pad for a lot of really significant turning points in our country's history in the 90s and 2000s. And to understand those, you need a foundational book like this to really get started.
Yeah, shout out. Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. I always forget to mention we do have a Patreon also over on the website. If you go down to ways you can support the book club, we do have a fiction edition Morbidly Curious book club over there starting at the $5 level. And we just finished up our discussion right before this of Leech by Hiron Ennis. And it was great. And Mike read it 2.5 times. And I love that because I love Leech. But yes, definitely finish it up and let us know what you thought. Because I really enjoyed this one as well. Steph.
I gave this book I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I think that's what I gave it yesterday at my chapter meeting too. I loved it. I loved the narrative style. I loved, like Nora said, that it was so unbiased, and I thought it was quite well laid out. I just really wanted more than like the last couple, maybe 100 pages. I wanted a little bit more of the whole, like the birth of the modern militias. I wanted more of that tie-in instead of it felt like it was just, I wanted more, and it felt a little rushed at the end to just put it there. And I was just like, but that part was really interesting. And I wanted to hear about that because it's permeated so far.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make everybody get into it today, but like we, a couple of years ago, almost had our own Waco in Canada, in Saskatchewan, actually with a QAnon cult. They took over an abandoned school, and they're still occupying that space. In October of 2023, we literally had a 24/7 monitoring RCMP response, which is basically like the FBI. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we'll get into it later.
Okay. Oh, great. Alyssa.
That's crazy. I'm gonna look into that. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 only because I reserve my 5 stars for like favorite books of all time. But so that's not to say this book wasn't incredible. I really loved it. I have a couple of personal Waco connection stories that I can save for later. So Waco's always been a topic of interest for me. And I think that it was really fascinating to hear more from the Branch Davidians as well. And I think there's a lot to be said about the Waco to mass school shootings pipeline.
Yeah.
That like Nora was talking about. And I think that I'm really excited to hear Nora talk more about, sorry, Nora, I called you out, but to hear you talk more about like the long-term effects of things like that. Cause it's something that has always fascinated me. Yeah, I loved it. It was great.
I'm so glad. Tam, not Cam.
Cam, not Cam. I also loved it. It will not be surprising to any of you that I gave it a 5 out of 5. I really appreciated the fact that I didn't feel like I was being pushed by the author one way or the other to feel a certain type of way about any of the facts that he laid out. I did end up learning a few new things from this book, which I was very surprised because I do like to consume content about Waco. So for me to learn new things was very, very, very good. And yeah, I just I got so mad. I'm glad that you guys brought up the fact that there could have been more talk about the birth of militias and just more at the end about that. I didn't even think about that until you guys mentioned it, but like I totally agree.
Yeah.
That would have been great to have. I don't want to say more because I know it's going to tie into the questions that we're going to be answering. So I'll just leave it there. But yeah, I really loved it.
Sorry, I started giggling right as you started talking. It's not something you said. I was laughing at Leanne up here saying, for fuck's sake,
I didn't even notice.
Also need to sneeze so bad. Good Lord. Glad you guys enjoyed it. I also agree completely that, the ending, it was like a chapter or two. Like by the time you get to the middle of it, obviously the siege is 51 days long. So it's going to last a little while where we're talking about, but I'm like, there's not a lot of book left for us to be talking about modern militias. Like, when is this going to tie in? And it felt pretty wrapped up pretty quickly, but that probably could be its own book within itself, just to break down, similar to how he broke down Waco Rising. Probably could break down January 6th as well. So, yeah, I'm glad for the most part enjoyed. I'm seeing lots of 5s, couple lower stars, but totally understand. Yeah, this is one of those books that after I read it, I was like, I think this is going to be one of those where for the majority of people for the most part, people are probably going to like it. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm so sorry. I totally would recommend it. That flew out of my brain. I would recommend it. It was great. I think it's a good starting point for the Waco siege.
Yeah, right. I had no idea.
So yeah, when we
it wasn't the origin story I was expecting, thrown out in the middle there, but
yeah, right. What were you saying, Kim?
When we were first getting ready to read this, in the middle of the book, there's a jump scare of right in the middle.
Oh my god!
David Koresh's big photo right there. So yeah, funny.
I haven't quite finished yet. I'm adjusting some mic settings really quick before we continue. Oh, hi, David. Yeah, totally. Glad you enjoyed it. Tell him
I agree with
all
that
the morbidly
too.
curious. Love. All right. Where are my questions? There we go. So, overall thoughts, for the most part, positive. Let's dive into specifics, which I'm sure we will get into more specific things within these questions, but my questions are general, and then from there we can expand. But something that was interesting about this, which I discovered, I've only done my Charlotte meeting. I have my Mooresville and Belmont coming up this week, but it seems like for the most part, from what I've heard on the Discord and in the Charlotte meeting today, there was people that thought that they knew stuff about Waco, whether or not it was because they were alive during the time this was happening, or they just general idea of what was going on. But there still seemed to be things to learn about Waco. There's still so much to learn about Waco. And it's not necessarily like the he said, she said bits of it. But like this was the first time, to be specific, that I heard about dogs on the compound.
Same. That was
And
one of
that-
the things for me too.
And that might have been the reason that the whole debate of like who shot first is kind of muddied because of, you know, Kevin Cook alludes to the fact, and that's something I agree. I think you were talking about it, Nora. That's something that I appreciated this book too, is the unbiased opinion, where he's not like, well, clearly evidence shows that they shot first. It's like, well, this is what we've heard over time, and it could have potentially started because somebody, saying this out loud, shot one of the dogs. So something like that was completely new to me. So going back through, Kelsey, if you want to start us off, what did you learn from this book that you didn't know prior to reading this, if anything? If you're like, this is all, I already knew all this, that's perfectly fine.
I know all. No, I don't know. I know nothing. No, and I don't know if it was so much that I learned that it was something new, but I think it was something that is not in media regarding Waco that I've consumed, was potentially some of the interviews or some of the thoughts or mentality like of the Branch Davidians, like during the course of events. Because I think in reading it, and I think David Cook alludes to or mentions it a handful of times as well, like, and there are some quotes from people that's like, yeah, the FBI like rolled up to the front door of these people who are just like, we're just chilling in Waco and like living our lives. Like, why are you shooting at us?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much more sense than what is deemed as like a standoff or like them being resistant. And it's like, well, US government fumbled the bag pretty much like right from the get-go. So like I can appreciate it made more sense. And I'm like, I think this again makes more sense of them like, yeah, like I don't know that I would trust you guys to want to come out and like peacefully surrender either. Like,
yeah.
And so it wasn't so much something new, but I don't know that I had ever considered that perspective or media had ever presented it in a way that had got me thinking like, oh yeah, like this,
yeah,
because there were 120 Branch Davidians more or less, and so
right.
I'm like, yeah,
I'm going through all this chat here. I'm appreciating some of the comments. Yeah, Cam also has never heard about the dogs. Yeah, there's a lot to juggle. I appreciate all the comments.
Dogs was also new to me.
Dogs new to me. The pregnant women, I think I knew. It was terrifying. And then also, Perla, the missing evidence. The whole ass front door, which is not a small piece of evidence. That's part of one of the ones that vanished, right? It was the front door with all the bullet holes in it, showing which direction the bullet holes were coming in. But this is also interesting, too. A lot of people didn't know a lot about Waco before this book, which I like. Sorry, Penny's barking. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear that. And the tie into Oklahoma City bombing was new info to you. I love people learning about that. But to continue on, I'll keep going through the comments. Nora, anything new, or were you like, child's play? I knew all about this.
No, there was new stuff. I study so many events that there are only certain ones that I really know, like all the details. For me, previously to reading this book, the role of Waco in my research was I spent a lot of time looking at the rise of white extremism groups in the United States right after World War II, which is really when they started getting going after the KKK, and how their recruitment methods and like their training methods were very similar to the Nazis. And so with Waco, it was kind of, they're like phases of white extremism in the US, right? So there's the KKK, and then there's this immediate post-World War II groups really started in like the areas we connect them with, like Idaho and Montana. And then there's Waco, and Waco really, in his subtitle, he says modern militias, and that's really true, right? It kind of changes this whole thing. And then you go to OKC. So there's just this like direct line. So for me, Waco was like part of that bigger picture. I'd never heard the Alex Jones connection before.
Nope. New to me.
Ever. Part of me is glad for that, right? That the research isn't focusing on him because he doesn't need the attention, but is focusing on the events and the people involved. The other thing that was new to me was just the discussion of the church today, right? That like someone came in and took over that church.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was reading that part and they talked about how he cut down the tree that had been planted in memory of Koresh, I was like, oh, so they took the church, but like they're not really into it. And then later it's like, we didn't take it down because we don't support what he did. We took it down because it was like getting too much attention or something. Right. And I was like, oh, so they do support it. I kind of had no idea about it. I think one of the really unique things about incidents like this is that you can get new information just because people are so focused on different things. And I think in the immediate years after Waco, the focus was really on like who shot first and how this impacted the government. And because OKC happened only 2 years later, and that was such a significant turning point in how the United States identified terrorism, that a lot of this information that's coming out about Waco, because there were like 3 books published within 2 years on this topic, 3 major books. You get that new info because people are kind of approaching it with a broader brush.
Yep. So I'm writing notes very poorly. I want to hit on later, so that's just me making sure I hit some of these. And can you read that? That's not English. Okay. Oh. Yikes.
Oh.
Interesting.
Poor David. Oh no, David. I'm sure
Start a cult. Start a cult.
David and I can go in together since I share a last name with Steve.
I know David IRL. He could definitely do some damage with an IRL quote or IRL cult. He could totally do that. I love that. I would follow you, David. Yeah, and you know that's something too. That's something as well. That I think people at the end of it were so focused on like the end, like how did we get here, that all they could do was hone in on the beginning, like who did what first. And I think it was going to vary depending on who you asked. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that were like, those crazy religious nuts were the ones that shot first. No, it was our government that shot first. And that's like, does that matter? Like, does that point actually matter to anything? Because one of the points is like, why were they there all gung-ho in the first place? And I think at this point it's not going to matter because we're never going to know. We're never going to know because it's just going to be a toss-up either way.
I think it mattered then because, so it came up a lot in the book, right? When they were approaching this, the only thing they had to compare it to was Jonestown, which didn't even happen on US soil, right?
Right.
So like their whole focus was, we can't have another Jonestown. After Waco is, we can't have another Waco. And it still is that way to this day with white extremism, right? So the focus was on the beginning because for the government, it was like, well, how do we not do this again? Right. Yep. And then for people on the other side, those white extremists, Timothy McVeigh being one of them, it was, well, how do we get our points across if they're just going to fire? Right. And so then it became this whole thing about that they had been on like the defensive in white extremism. And now, well, the government started the war, so we're going to go on the offensive. How many years later now, who shot first probably doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But in the scope of like government policy, then it was probably one of the only things they cared about.
Yeah. And the mentioning of Jonestown is important. I also want to bring up Cam's comment here in a little bit about the cutting the tree down. But I do want to continue on with the panel, but then we'll revisit Jonestown here in a second. I do want to make sure everything's okay. I heard yelling, and that made me a little nervous. Go ahead, Steph. Sorry.
So the interesting thing is I knew the broad strokes of Waco, but Waco is one of those events that didn't quite make it north of the border, which is odd because most things do. Like the most innocuous things, there are literally people who believe that Canadians have First Amendment rights and free speech. We don't have free speech. We have freedom of expression, and it's different. And so because most things make it up here, I kind of assumed that Waco made it up here. but we don't know the details of it as much. It's not as widely known. It's basically Waco inspired the OKC bombing. That's what we know, because that was really important. Because the biggest thing, and it's exactly what Nora was saying about how it ties into how Americans think about terrorism, because that's when the Canadian and American kind of identities really connect to each other, is with 9/11. Because all of the planes that were in American airspace were diverted to Newfoundland, to Gander. That's kind of where like we established this like really strong partnership of showing up for each other as countries and as sibling nation, like neighboring nations, where we've gotten a little away from it currently with the current government, because Trump wants to literally take over, which is a whole thing. We can get into that later. But the details of Waco didn't come here, so I actually didn't know a ton. I knew it happened, and I knew it was not well handled by the FBI and the ATF. And I knew that there was a massive fire and a lot of people died, and that we don't want to repeat it, but I didn't know a ton of the stuff about it. And it was very interesting, honestly, to learn. And I'm really glad that this is one of the first pieces, like one of the first pieces of media of any kind that I actually did pick up about Waco, because it was so unbiased. So he didn't have a lot of the like, oh, the FBI was super wrong, the government was wrong, or the Branch Davidians were wrong. It was kind of a really nice, like unbiased way to kind of formulate my own opinions about it. Yeah. So I did really like that. I mean, I knew of it because, again, like Kelsey said, I'm a white girl who likes true crime. So like I knew broad strokes what happened, and I was like, yeah, like David Koresh is a pretty shitty person. So like there's no apologies over here, but then, you know, this was very interesting to kind of dive deep into it a little bit.
From a completely outsider perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, from the 51st state, as they say.
Yes.
Yikes. Alyssa.
So I knew about Tim McVeigh, like following the story, being inspired by it and the connections. I didn't know he actually went there.
On T-Shirt Hill?
Yeah, and they have like, so because I watched the Netflix docuseries today because I wasn't able to watch with everybody else. And they have like news footage of him being there, and I was like, that's so weird. That's so weird.
Being interviewed and everything, yeah.
Yeah, like there was footage of Tim McVeigh there, and I was like, that's crazy. Yeah. Ugh. Made me uncomfy. Like knowing.
Selling bumper stickers and shit too.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
Do you want to go ahead and get into some of the Waco connections of people that you know? Yeah,
so well, I don't know anybody that was actually directly involved, but my uncle was a deputy sheriff in Comal County. He was like later in his career, he was an undercover narcotics agent, but like before that, he was a deputy sheriff, and he was like, they were next to be called to go there. So he called my aunt who worked at a radio station and was like, you need to start listening to the news because something is happening. And he, like, if it had gotten worse, they were going to start calling in local police as well as backup. And he was going to be one of the ones who had to go.
Yikes.
And that's crazy.
Well, it's crazy too. Go ahead and continue talking. I'm going to find a quote really quick. Something I wanted to bring up that I brought up earlier.
So while you search, I will say that in 2016, I went to, or 2017, January. It was inauguration day. It was a bad time. I went to a march in Austin, and on the way back, we went to Mount Carmel and went and looked at the memorial that they have up for the people who died and the children and stuff. And they had these like Hillary Clinton for jail flags, and it was silent. There was no one around.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
It is in the middle of nowhere. And like there were cars like far away, and they have like the new chapel and stuff, but we didn't see a single person, but we still felt like we were being watched.
Oh, I'm sure.
And my cats are fighting. And But it was really creepy and really sad and like very somber and kind
Mhm.
of love. Like the memorial was lovely, and you know, there was a sadness there, but also very creepy.
Lived in Oklahoma. Yeah, creepy, very much so. It's really quickly, just to share this. I read this out loud today too, because we were talking about, by the end of the discussion at the Charlotte chapter, we were just talking about a little bit of humanity, but mentioning that they potentially needed backup for your uncle to be there. This is page 180. As the fire spread, one of the largest government forces ever gathered on American soil did little but watch and wait. One tally put the total at, you ready? 16 tanks and combat engineering vehicles, 672 federal agents, 131 Texas Department of Public Safety officers, 31 Texas Rangers, 35 local police officers, 15 members of the Army, and 13 from the Texas National Guard. None of them dared rush in to try to save the 85 people inside. They had reason to believe the Davidians might shoot them. And they might have needed backup. Woof. Tam.
Hi.
How are you
I
feeling?
highlighted that portion too. I don't highlight whole paragraphs. I'll just like draw lines around it and then like write something. So my comment for that section was what? The big thing that I was surprised to learn was when the negotiators were trying to get Kathy Schroeder out of the compound. And
God.
I want to go on record by saying that if Kathy has no haters, I am dead and in the ground.
I was waiting for it.
So the negotiators are saying, like, because her son had come out of the compound, like he was one of the kids to come out like before that. So they were saying, oh, like Brian really needs a hug. Brian wants a hug from his mommy, like really trying to appeal to like her motherhood, obviously. And she does end up leaving the compound. But I was surprised to find that David Koresh, I guess, had caught her smoking, which was against their rules. And he basically kicked her out, which was like I guess the main reason for her leaving. And I was very surprised to learn that. And then, yeah, just I can't stand her. I'm sure that will come up again.
Yeah, I was waiting. I should have started a timer. How soon would it be until Kathy is mentioned? So for those of you who haven't seen, we did a watch party for the Patreon. We watched Netflix's American Apocalypse over on the Discord, which is one of the best documentaries, I'd say. It really interviews all different types of people, but they do interview some of the former, I guess, I don't know if they're still active in the church, Branch Davidians, one of them being Kathy Schroeder, who had some very choice things to say about David's child brides. It is vile, and
Vile.
does it with her whole chest. So if you'd like to watch that, you certainly can. Great.
She hints at it in the book too, but she didn't she wasn't quoted like that. Just a fucking vile human being.
Vile. Yeah. So I do want to go back to the trees, and I do want to go back to Jonestown, because this is something that I thought was interesting. And it was brought up in the Charlotte chapter today as well, where whenever Jonestown happened and they created this memorial, right, of all the people that died, there was an uproar that Jim Jones was added to the tally of people that died in the Jonestown massacre. Some people were like, well, he was one of those that perished. Other people were like, get that man off of this. I mean, it's literally like etched in stone. So it was interesting hearing all these connections with the people trying not to do another Jonestown, trying not to do another Ruby Ridge and all this stuff, but seeing the parallels of the aftermath with the trees planted for the 80-some victims. And they had a tree for Koresh. Well, the current pastor? Man who runs the Branch Davidians, I guess now, took it down. And some people felt like that was the right choice. Some people felt like that was the incorrect choice. And actually at the Charlotte meeting today, somebody brought up that they believe this also happened with Columbine as well, which I need to double check my research on that. But the debate of whether or not to include the leader in these sort of things. And also, yes, God told me to cut it down, which is a choice. That's a choice.
Oh boy.
Yeah. All right, buddy. So let me know your thoughts on that. Does anybody in particular have anything they want to touch on with that? Do you want to go back through, or is there anybody that just wants to poke in really quick and talk about the, you were nodding your head, Nora, about Colin.
Yeah, I think that this right here shows a great example of how society has moved from these incidents and like how the response is, because now there is a very strong feeling across law enforcement and media that you do not say the perpetrator's name. Like they will not be known for that crime. And like with Jonestown and Waco and OKC, like we all know their names because it wasn't a thing then. But now, like I was watching something recently with the FBI and they were it was the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Right.
And they were talking about it from the police perspective. And one of the law enforcement said, we're not going to say his name. Right? We're not going to say his name. He's a murderer. That's what he is.
Right.
And I think that is a very prevalent stance for a lot of people these days. And I really feel like Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook were like the last incidents where people were like, I would recognize the name of that person.
Yeah.
Because that shift happened really significantly in the like late 2010s.
Yeah. Anybody else want to touch on it?
I just want to add to that point.
Well,
It's so interesting, though, that it took the US that long to get there. So the context I think of this in is, so we had a school shooting in the 96. So only a few years after Waco. And to this day, I actually do not know the name of the man who killed all of those, like killed 12 women in Montreal at École Polytechnique. I don't know. We don't say his name. We never have. But every single year on December 6th, I know this because it's also my mom's birthday, we always say the victims' names.
Mm-hmm.
And we always have. Like ever since, this is like one of my like core early childhood true crime memories that I have, is that we always do this, but we never talk about him. The only thing that we talk about him is that he was an engineering student and he hated women. And therefore his whole thing was that he wanted to eliminate them. And he didn't think that women should be in STEM. And that's like the extent of what I know about him. I've never had the like desire to go figure out who he is or anything. But so it surprises me that from like two countries that are so similar culturally in how we deal with these issues, we're so different in that we arrived at that so quickly. And I mean, we don't have a lot of mass shooting incidents either to kind of quote unquote learn from.
Right.
But yet I also do know like all the names of all the American ones up to like exactly what you said, up to Sandy Hook. I know all their names of all the shooters.
Yeah.
Because it was so prevalent. They were all over the news. Their faces were everywhere. And the only time that I think we've ever done that here was Sherry will know. Sherry, if you can put his name in the chat if you want to. You don't have to, but I know you'll know him. We had a mass shooting by an army official.
Oh, right.
And he's the only one that I think everybody knows his name, because that was like a big deal. And it was more about the fascination of figuring out like why.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he do that? Because he's such a highly trained, highly decorated person.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to me to think that there's like this huge difference in how we deal with these things.
Side note.
Side note.
A little positivity. Cap score.
Yes.
Almost wore my cap study today, but it's a little too warm.
love. Yeah, it's a little too warm for that. There's just a slight delay, Kelsey. So I think you started talking, but go ahead and say what you were going to say. And then Alyssa, I saw you raise your hand too. And Cam, if you want to touch on it, you can as well.
I know we're all raising our hands.
Sorry, I should have just gone in order.
I don't know. It's fine. I've got complicated feelings about memorials for like the individuals on one level. But what that made me think of, like in thinking of memorials, and it's like for remembrance and for like those who are left behind and such. And I think of it so much from this perspective because I fell down years and years ago a rabbit hole with one of the Columbine shooters' moms. And the impacts that often get neglected on the families of the perpetrators of these things. So of the Jim Jones, of the Columbine shooters, of the David Koreshes, like, and so that in my mind complicates too. It's like, how do we then, like, do we include them and not name them? Like, do we include them? Like, do we just straight not include them? And I think, I don't know, you've all seen the memes going around where it's like lobotomize me so I don't experience empathy anymore because it's too much. Like those get me into such complex, like weird rabbit holes because I'm like, no, like obviously like you did a fucked up thing and like you should be held to task for that. But also have to acknowledge these systems and families and like, I would say like other victims of these people that then really get one, either like cast by the wayside and never spoken of again, or like in the situation of the Columbine shooters, their one family, like just like these vicious like attacks and harassment of like, well, you should have done more and like you should have like done X, Y, and Z. And it's like these are grieving families, like whether you want to think about them like that or not. Like, I think it makes the question of memorializing them like so much like muddier and harder of. Like, how do we handle these things with grace and like delicacy, but also, I don't think David Koresh should get a statue because he did screwed up shit that I am morally repulsed by. So,
I do have Sue. Is it Sue Klebold that has the memoir? I think I have her book. Yeah.
I believe she released a memoir.
That's a rough one. I don't know when I want to get to that.
It's a lot.
I bet. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, you must have just caught me stretching or something because I definitely don't have any to add.
I look like you went like this really quick. Sorry. Okay. Tam, anything?
Yeah, I mean, so shout out to Cam because I think her comment makes a great point because I originally did want to say that I don't think David Koresh is a victim at all. I think that he was a terrible person, and I think that he roped, well, I mean, so the only people that I feel bad for in this scenario is the kids who didn't have a choice in the matter one way or the other. Yes. I do think that the government, the ATF, to start with, first of all, could have arrested David Koresh when he was like he mentioned in his own quotes, like in town at Walmart or like going for a run in the neighborhood, whatever it was. They could have gotten him another way. So like the whole thing didn't even need to happen, but like he's a pedophile and a religious fanatic, and he's not a victim. So like I mean I don't know, I have complicated feelings about the tree specifically because like the kids didn't deserve to go through that, and like, I was gonna say like neither did his followers, but I mean like I don't think any of them deserve to die in the fire or to have their compound shot up. Right. But they were complicit as well. So like you can use God as a means to justify just about anything if you get to that point that they were at. So yeah.
Yeah, and that was a topic too that we touched on today as well, where, of course, the who shot first is always going to be up for debate. But something too to kind of explore is, and this is something I asked Kevin on the podcast, how could this have gone right, without us needing however many tanks I mentioned earlier. And that, of course, was one of them. Like even David Koresh said himself, I'm in gym shorts running around. You could have just had me at Walmart and I would have spoken to you. Didn't like when they first arrived, he was like walking out the door to go talk to him, and that's when the firefight
he pokes his head
started.
out the door and he's like, hey, let's talk. And
What's
then
up? Yeah.
The shooting
Not that
starts.
I'm empathetic towards the guy, but he does have a point. Like, we could have grabbed him. Also, Gary Nesner, letting him just finish his fucking job would have been nice, because I feel like he would have been slightly successful.
Maybe also telling Janet Reno, the attorney general at the time, the whole story, right? Like, maybe not keeping things from her would have been something as well.
If she just finished reading the paperwork that was given to her.
Well, that too. Yeah.
Why would you admit that? Why would you say that out loud, that you didn't finish?
And didn't she leave for like a conference too? Maybe stay where you are and like do your job. I don't know.
I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not saying she didn't make mistakes, but hadn't she been on the job for like a few weeks, if not less?
She wasn't new. She was
just new.
Sworn her in, and they're like, "Here you go."
So like
the ink hadn't dried on her paperwork yet, and she's out
right.
in the trenches of Waco, Texas.
Right, and Clinton's administration was new, right? And again, I will say this for almost every incident that happens, but like, they had never gone through something like this. I'm in no way supporting one side or the other, but like, they'd never gone through something like this. Negotiation in the FBI was new. And so they literally didn't have procedures for this specific incident. Their hostage procedures was for one perpetrator.
Yeah.
Who wasn't in their home, but was in somewhere else and had like taken hostages, right? Yeah. So they were doing what they thought they knew, but like for an incident it didn't apply to. And I mentioned this to some of you, but the same thing happened with Columbine, right? The policy and procedure for school shootings, because we think of Columbine as like the first big one, right? But it was not. It wasn't even the first mass shooting. I don't remember which book I was reading recently. It was tied to this, but there were like 3 major mass shootings in the United States in like the 70s and 80s that had double-digit deaths that no one talks about because it's Waco, OKC, Columbine. But like with Columbine, the procedure was don't go into the building while there's active shooting, right? Because a lot of these perpetrators wanted to go after first responders too. As soon as Columbine happened, that policy changed. And it was like, go in. Yeah. If you were at a school shooting or a mass shooting, go in. And that's why we saw the issue at Uvalde in Texas, because they didn't go in. So they were like breaking procedure, but also just not being good humans.
Yep.
Right. And so that's why we saw such a reaction to that. People lost their jobs. There were lawsuits because the policies were in place. With Waco, those procedures weren't in place. So like, while we look at it and say, this is morally not okay, how this happened, and the government looks at it that way too, but they say legally and procedurally, we just followed what we had been trained to do, which is no excuse. I was just following orders is not an excuse for anything, but they just didn't know better.
Yeah.
It was like the first incident where negotiators and the HRT were working together is only the second incident since Ruby Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, also too, we were talking about the battle cries like for the children as well, and they were actively, Cam also pointed out that they were actively lying to her. I also feel like I need to mention, I hope it's obvious, but I feel like I should just say it. None of us here have like a specific side that we are taking. I feel like we're gonna say a lot of things with the caveat of I'm not taking sides, but so just know everything we say has the asterisk of everybody. Two big forces with guns is never a good thing. No matter what they believe in, no matter what the tactic is, this is always going to end poorly. Also, I do remember I bought this book a while ago and I need to read it. I bought it at a used bookstore. It's called Murder in the Neighborhood, The True Story of America's First Recorded Mass Shooting by Ellen J. Green. I don't know if you've read this one. Is it good? It's from 1949. 28-year-old.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
28-year-old. First recorded mass shooting. So I knew I had it. You were talking about that and I was like, something up there on the topic of that.
The only one that again, I can't remember the book because I read like 4 books right after Waco Rising that had to do with extremism. It could have been in any of them. I want to say it was either in Chaos Comes Calling or Homegrown. Chaos Comes Calling just came out.
Type.
Authors can't remember the author's name. It
Sasha
looks at
Abramsky.
It looks at two towns, one in California and then one is Sequim, Washington, and how far-right extremism infiltrated those towns and what the causes of that were. And it's very recent because it's the COVID pandemic. It could have been that one. It could have been Homegrown by Jeffrey Toobin, but they were like listing these 3 mass shootings. And the only one I remember is the restaurant in Texas. Right. And that was in the 80s, I think. And that was the big one that everybody talked about before the mass shootings unfortunately got more prominent. But otherwise, right, like they have to take the data that they have and the experience that they have and go from there. And like Steph said, hopefully do something about it.
The wild thing about it.
Y'all are fine. Steph, go ahead.
The wild thing about it though too is like, so maybe they didn't have these procedures and policies and whatever, but it's definitely not a policy to fabricate evidence. And they just did that so much that I was like, there are actual, and it's interesting, this came up at my chapter meeting too, was the only crimes they actually knew that the Branch Davidians were committing before they went in was the weapons violations. And when you think about it, they did also, it was referenced, it was very much in passing. It was like a one-liner. And then like we completely forgot about it for a while because like with this whole thing of they were really in on Janet Reno about the children, technically, and I come at this professionally, technically, which does not mean that my profession is correct. They are not. I will caveat with that also. The correct professionals had been inside that compound and quote unquote addressed the potential child abuse situations that were definitely occurring.
Right.
And deemed that they did not need to intervene. And it comes into this, we got into this very deep, like very sketchy conversation about the difference between parental rights and child protection. And so basically what these social workers likely found in this whole thing, because child protection social workers went in, Department of Family Services went in, deemed that this was all okay. And the likely reason that was that these parents were all giving permission. They were all okay with what was happening. They knew these kids were being physically beaten and that was okay with them. They were giving permission for their underage daughters to marry Koresh. They were saying that that's fine. And in a place where parental rights take precedence over parental responsibility, the social workers' hands are tied at that point legally. They can't really do anything because the parents are saying this is okay and this is what I want for my child. And at that point, they have the right because that child is not in a hospital.
But there is, the law states that statutory rape, whether or not the parents give permission or not, is still against the law. So like, since he was having sex with underage girls, parental permission would only go so far in a court of law at that point. So I mean that's where like the line is for me with the whole parental permission thing. So there is that, like in the States, like statutory rape is
we're in the bad place.
Statutory rape, basically, so.
Yeah, but when Waco happened, were statutory rape laws on the books yet?
93?
I don't think so.
Oh my God, we're in the bad place.
And if it was state by state.
I was gonna say,
certainly
Steph may
wasn't
know.
in Texas.
Yeah.
I don't,
Steph
because I'm
may
not
have similar
American.
experiences to me too. someone who
Yeah,
deals
yeah.
with DHS and like Department of Human Services and like those agencies, like they are overworked, overrun agencies, and they
Yeah.
are not. And I don't want to disparage them because I think if it's all systems, we have bad systems, but like they
Everything's bad.
don't always do their job.
Yeah.
And
Don't wanna,
sometimes jobs are restricted and
right. I don't want to forget
It's
Alyssa too was going
I
to
feel
say
it.
something as well.
Oh, I was going to ask if Nora was talking about the shooting at Luby's in Killeen.
Yes.
And then a couple people said it in the comments, and I was like, yeah.
Yes, that's exactly the one, because that was like the one that was presented. Um,
I'm trying to find when the statutory rape laws.
I also
were-
just Googled that, and then I was like, oh, shouldn't have done that on my computer.
So it's not funny. It's not funny.
It's okay. The other
1970s?
night, I literally typed in documentaries about death to give you recommendations.
On
my
the
search is
work
going weird.
computer?
I'm not on my work computer. I'm on my personal computer.
Yeah.
the But while Steph was talking, one thing we haven't mentioned yet that I knew about but continues to blow my mind is that before this all started, they had an ATF agent undercover embedded in that building.
Oh, yeah.
And if anybody's going to come out and I know ATF doesn't deal with child abuse or anything like that, but as federal agents, they are mandatory reporters.
Yes.
If anybody was going to come out of that building and say, there's child abuse going on here, it would have been him.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen. We know it did. But he was embedded in that building, and he came out and he said guns. And that's all he said. Now, it may have been because he was in an ATF mindset, but the other thing, and I'd have to go back in the book, so someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when they presented it to Janet Reno, and again, I'm not condoning any of this, they said child abuse. They didn't say he's marrying and having sex with underage girls, which are two very different things.
They told her that he was beating babies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
They were going to the extreme, which to be fair, I mean, I know that they were, they believed in.
They had the paddle.
Corporal,
Yeah.
Right? So
They were doing that too.
They believed in all of that. But also the parents were fine with it. But somebody mentioned today in the meeting, and I know this is one of those topics at hand, but like, the whole idea of like, oh, the 90s were different, like you spanked your kids, like you did all this and like that topic comes up too, but that's a whole other can of worms that I'm sure Kelsey you could go into as well with your background. But
I think what really is different is what we were just talking about is the laws were different.
Yeah.
These laws just didn't exist. Right. And legally they had to follow what was on the books. So and I'm not an expert in this, and I know there are lawyers in the group, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but they could go after child abuse and they could go after guns, and then they could go after the supposed meth lab. Underage marriages, because I think that the age of consent in Texas has always been around 13 or 14.
Oh, God.
Even before statutory laws.
Wow. I didn't know that.
They've since changed it, I believe, but many of the states for a very, very long time had 12, 13, 14 was the age of consent with parental approval, and they had that.
Yeah, it's 17 now.
They've had to change it because of everything that's happened in the last 3 decades.
Kelsey, any thoughts on this while we're on the topic?
just of the child abuse.
Yeah.
That was probably definitely happening. And on the one, and again, not condoning, like I am boggled by it. But two, I can believe that it was a like side effect of it being the 90s and people just like being in a mindset of like, yeah, you hate your kids, like kids are seen, not heard, like obviously, which is a terrible, I do not condone this mindset, but it was very prevalent in, because I'm a 92 baby, so I was like, it's very prevalent, like in the like cohort that I grew up in. And then also again, just, and I could go on a whole rant about the Department of Human Services, I won't, but
right,
they're overworked, underfunded agencies, and they sometimes their hands are tied by legal things and what like very strict definitions say, and just sometimes you get a bad draw and you get a bad investigator and they just don't really give a shit unless Like, it is there in front of, like, in their face. And I can imagine that if they go into a situation and parents are like, yeah, no, like, this is totally fine, or like, I've given consent for this, or like this is our religion. Like, I can very much see a set of investigators being like, well, we checked in and everyone is happy, healthy, like, we're good to go. So I can very much.
I think the other thing too that, and it's not a popular thing to want to have to consider, but the other thing that we have to consider about the 90s and the Department of Family Services and social work as a profession entirely, especially in this context, is that social work comes out of the same place as the Branch Davidian religion. Social work comes from Christianity. That is where it was originally a faith-based profession that came out of Christianity. And so therefore, a lot of these things that we see as wrong now, they would not have considered as wrong originally because they also believed the same things. Because it all comes from the same book.
Sorry if my
I
typing
feel
was slow.
necessary to say I'm an LMHC. I am not a social worker. I should have probably made it clear on that one, but I don't think that I knew that. And that is, that's going to be a rabbit hole I fall down now. The origins of social work.
This was
look at the cult of true womanhood at the end of the 19th century, which is very much in line with what social work coming out of religion that Steph was talking about.
Yeah.
It's how they could send women and girls to institutions in prison for looking at someone the wrong way. And it's all tied to the same thing: the social work, the child services, the cult of true womanhood. It all comes out of that very heavily Protestant-based foundation of the country.
Awesome. So some of the things leading up to Waco and then during the siege of things that happened were just mind-boggling weird. The news anchor or newscaster that was so excited to tell the mailman about the raid happened to be David Koresh's brother-in-law or something like that. For the love of God. The grenades falling over in the box of the UPS truck. But also, this was crazy. The two men, Perla here commented, the two men that crossed the 18. I don't even think there was a blockade. I think he just waltzed onto the property. And what's crazy is somebody in the Charlotte reminded me today in the Charlotte chapter talking about the number of hostages. Why the hell did that happen? That did not need to happen.
Confetti. Hooray.
It's like the comedian that gave that guy in the front row the button to like hit the confetti when you think I've hit a good point in the show. The hostage number went up because two people just waltzed into the building and one of them left because he was mad that he couldn't smoke weed.
Yeah. If I remember right, one of them just waltzed back out. Like, they didn't apprehend him or anything. Like, he just left.
They both did.
Just left.
They both did. He was like, I've done all I can. They're speaking to God. I approve of what they're doing, and walked out. I also can't imagine it was that difficult to get on the compound. I know they were keeping like the media and stuff back, but there was freaking T-shirt hill. Like, people are gathering. Right. With everything going on, it must have been so easy to sneak onto that land.
I bet. Yeah, chain of events that led to all these things too. It's interesting that a lot of people did not know about the Oklahoma City connection as well. Fun fact, by the way, I had a whole list of questions. We pretty much hit them all when it came to the unbiased opinion from Kevin Cook. What did we think about, did our opinion at all change? I guess that's something maybe we can touch on a little bit more, but our opinion at all change about the Branch Davidians or FBI/ATF after reading this book? Because I know a lot of people in the Discord were frustrated that they suddenly had a little bit more empathy towards the Branch Davidians after reading this one. So we can touch on that, I guess, a little bit, but I know we've touched on it a little bit. But also I see David here as a question. We can hit that too. What was the first thing that I said?
We hit all of our questions. The OKC.
Thank you. This is the third book club that I've done today, guys, by the way. I had a Waco Leech Waco, and it's my brain is mush at this point. So fuck, stop doing that. Did we know about the Oklahoma City connection? I think at the time not a lot of people did, but after Timothy McVeigh started singing like a canary, people started to make that connection. But there's a couple people in the midst of it. I know in the American Apocalypse documentary, there was a couple people that heard the date April 19th and immediately knew.
I think OKC is how I first found Waco.
Oh, wow.
Because OKC is one of the first major
the
events I
same.
remember watching happen. I was about to turn 10. And I watched OKC because I vividly remember we were on spring break. So I was home.
Yeah.
TV was on. And I think I went backwards from OKC to Waco because I was a little too young for Waco. For those of you that are more interested in this connection, I cannot recommend more Homegrown by Jeffrey Toobin.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about modern militias. It talks about the history of that movement. It talks about the Waco to OKC pipeline. You will learn more about Timothy McVeigh than you ever wanted to know, but it's really well done for that pipeline. I just read it again for the second time before this meeting. So yeah, I went backwards, right? But I was really surprised in the new Netflix OKC documentary.
Yeah.
Which is also very good.
I think Britt just highlighted that one in the comments too. Yeah, the OKC.
They showed footage of a news anchor within hours of the bombing saying it's the anniversary of Waco.
Mm-hmm.
Because when OKC first happened, they thought it was Middle Eastern terrorism because at that time, that was how terrorism looked, both overseas and here. And the most recent act of terrorism on U.S. soil had been the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And that was done by a Middle Eastern terrorist. So they immediately thought Middle Eastern terrorism. And within hours, somebody said, this is the anniversary of Waco. And what I thought was also interesting and mentioned there is Bill Clinton was interviewed for Homegrown. And he said he did not make that connection. Someone had to tell him. But Janet Reno, who took responsibility for Waco, knew immediately. Like as soon as she saw the date, she said it's the anniversary of Waco.
It's a good point too that David brought up here as well.
Yeah. I liked this question, and then there was a following comment from MC talking about, and it's so interesting because MS, exactly correct. And actually when we try, because there is something, I'm sure that the US has them. I don't know what you guys call them. We call them CTOs, compulsory treatment orders. When you force someone, they might be a 504 for you guys.
It's the 72-hour holds.
I think that 504 or 505 sounds right. 72-hour holds. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we force people,
there's got a few names, but
yeah, exactly. But when we force people
5150
into treatment, one, it doesn't work because they're not willing to engage in the change process. But it actually has kind of the opposite intended effect. And I actually think that in this case could have made the situation worse because it's again taking away freedoms. And so like when you think about what like the Branch Davidians were like, we're not doing anything wrong. We're just on our own compound trying to live our lives. And you guys came in here with guns and started shooting, according to Koresh.
Right.
That's the community treatment orders do the same thing. We're basically saying you're not conforming to what we as a society think you should be doing. And therefore, we're putting you in this hospital and we're making you engage with this system because we want to make you better. And it really just becomes a very dehumanizing experience. And so I actually think that in many cases with some of these things, even things like school shootings, it actually can make those situations worse and accelerate that process of going from, like underground thinking about planning loosely, not a solid plan, to actually executing. one of these events.
Yeah. Any comments on that? Anybody else?
And I think I had made a
I just
note of
have a-
that more in the context of like the Davidians coming in and being like, oh, what was it? I have to find it now. But Koresh already kind of being this conspiracy theorist who's like, oh, the government's like trying to take our guns. And then the ATF coming in and essentially without meaning to reinforcing that conspiracy thinking, which I imagine just made him dig his heels in that much harder of. And so it's the same. We say like, well, you have to go to therapy now. And they're like, well, fuck you. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Or see like, you're saying I'm wrong, or you're saying like, that's not what's going on here. And it's a real... Sorry, I knocked
Sorry.
crap on the table. My bad.
Also with like the
But it can really,
underlying
reinforce that confirmation thinking of
the underlying tones of religion make it, there's a really thin line with forcing someone into psychiatric care because of religious beliefs that was very powerful at this time. But also, I of course have a book recommendation for what Steph said. The college psychiatrist that treated the Aurora shooter before the shooting wrote a book. It's called Aurora. It talks about her interactions with him prior to the event, and then she was mercifully attacked after the shooting for not stopping it and had to go into hiding.
I'm putting all the books that you're recommending in the chat, by the way. I'm just trying to find not Bezos locations, but it's kind of hard. This is it, I think. Lynn Fenton, does that name ring a bell?
It's right behind me, so
yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me put this in the chat. Yes, Nora does have all the best book recommendations.
When you study the stuff, it's easy to have the books. I have not read all of them though, but I have read the ones that I recommended in this meeting.
There's a reason I don't keep track of how many I read behind me, because it just will depress me. Something that's interesting that you brought up, I want to say, Kelsey, I apologize if it wasn't. There was a little bit of a mix of a couple things, because it's something I wanted to talk to Kevin Cook about as well, because what's something that fascinates me about Waco, it's like one of those scenarios where you have a figure who believes he is a Messiah, and we can get into that here in a second, but his prophesizing of reading the book of Revelation, claiming that the end of the world's coming, they're going to come guns a-blazing, and then they do. So to a point, how could his followers not believe? At this point, they're in a building with guns aimed at them, and their savior is telling them one thing, but how are they going to suddenly turn on that and go to freedom? Because they don't even know what freedom is. But something that's fascinating to me, this is kind of a two-part thing, is this false prophecy where they're claiming and they're manipulating. Question in that as well. Do you think David Koresh was a manipulator, or was he just stupid? Or did he firmly believe that these things were going to happen? But like telling people that all these things were going to happen, and when they did, of course, we're going to lead to those conclusions of the Branch Davidians not wanting to leave the burning building. But the idea, too, from the very beginning, what I was saying here is the false prophet. Did David Koresh, do you think he genuinely thought he was hearing from God? Because that was like a big thing with him talking to like the FBI negotiators for a while there, where they were like, "Are you a prophet? What are you?" And he's, "Oh, to be determined," or whatever. Do you think that David Koresh, one, was actually believing what he was hearing, or do you think he was a master manipulator all along and he knew how to get people to follow him? What was the second part of that question? I guess just I want to hit on the manipulation part. Do you think that this false prophet idea is actually him believing, no, God is talking to me, or I've got all of these people and I've got all these wives under my belt? Kelsey, do you want to start? So many wives.
Yeah, and you're probably gonna have to hit me on the list of things again.
Mostly just manipulation. That's a kind of a
weird, 'cause
loaded
at
question.
Portions,
yeah.
I'm like, fair. Well, and I don't think I would have said it. At points, I would say no, and at other points, I've got one line because it kind of like blew my mind a little bit, that I'm like, and everyone was just like cool with this. All right. It's early on, it's page 31, and it's Koresh never claimed to be a saint. He said he wasn't the original Jesus, but a 20th century Christ, a quote, sinful Messiah for a sinful era. If the Bible is true, then I'm Christ, he told a reporter who came digging at the anthill. But what was so great about being Christ? A man of sorrow, acquainted with grief. And that was a lot of his justification of, he's like, well, you all can't smoke, but I can smoke. Like, you all can't have sex with the women, but I can. And so parts, I would believe that I'm like, I think you just genuinely think like you have some insight into the Bible that nobody else has got. And other times I'm like, you very much set up a system where you were benefiting from these beliefs and kind of putting everyone else in a second, I don't want to say second class, but like second class citizen status where rules for thee, not for me.
Yeah.
So I would trend more towards thinking that like there's manipulation going on here. Like you have a degree of awareness of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you just really lucked out that the government came in guns blazing and happened to sync up with your view of events in the world. So
how do you feel about him being called a narcissist?
I have a really big mark on that from where they talked to the psychiatry. I think he was a professor at a university there, who's like, oh yeah, like he's a narcissist and has X, Y, and Z. And that made my blood boil. That they would, from my profession standpoint, that they would throw those terms around, having only gotten secondhand information about him, and to say with definitive of like, yeah, he's a narcissist and he's manipulating. And I'm like, you can't make those claims about people you've never met or interviewed or like interacted with. Like,
sure,
that's a dangerous fucking precedent to set. So that's my attitude on that. And
I just feel like
the psychiatrist did it. I think they,
well, it's
I mean, pulled other people in who said similar things.
Narcissist is one of those words too that gets a little muddied, but I think on the outside looking in, it's very plausible, but it is one of those things where it is probably need to sit down with the guy and have a conversation with him to truly come to a conclusion. But I guess, that's why I get hung up on because some of the stories that we hear are people that believed him like wholeheartedly. So it's hard to sometimes gauge how people felt. There's probably people out there who are genuinely believe that he was the second coming of Christ.
I think David Thibodeau, who was in the Netflix documentary, I think he still believes it.
Oh,
a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But so I am always very careful about accusing someone that their religious beliefs are wrong. Right? Because everyone is free to have those religious beliefs, I believe, until it impacts harm on someone else.
Sure.
So I think, just based on what I know, again, I fully agree with Kelsey. Haven't talked to him, don't know anything. I think he truly believed it. And whether it was because he was having hallucinations or what other many causes could have been, I think he truly believed it. I think the difference between someone who is like, God speaks to me, I'm the Messiah, and someone who believes that and makes a cult is that there's that manipulation aspect to it, right? And so I think there are probably people out there that do believe they're the Messiah, but they're about themselves, right? They're not like spreading the word.
Sure.
And it may be because they don't have that personality, right? But what we see in a lot of these cult leaders is that they do truly believe it, and they have that personality that they can get other people to believe it too. Right. And I think that is what we are seeing with Koresh.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, this person believes that they're hearing from God. There has to be some sort of, how do I word this appropriately? I mean, there has to be some sort of something happening, right?
Right.
Like, obviously it can't be true. So, it's a fine line, because clearly whatever he was saying was working. Because there are still some people who charisma scores off the chart. Yeah. I'm reading comments instead of clicking them up. I'm sorry.
And going back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning about things we didn't know, with my research, I'm not really delving into the history of the Branch Davidians. It's not kind of part of what I look at. I always assumed he started the Branch Davidians. It was his cult, right?
Yeah.
To find out that it was a like legitimate
Existing.
religious compound, which were huge back then, and people that just wanted to live separate from society and grow their own food and be around people that believed the same things as them. And then he came in, took that, and made it something negative. And I hadn't really realized that before, right? Because when you hear Waco, you hear Koresh, you hear Branch Davidians, and I was like, great, he started it. But he didn't. And I think that's what makes, like, adds to the sadness of this whole event, right? Is that he took something that was probably, you know, really meaningful for people and just twisted it in such a way that there ended up being this massive loss of life.
And I think it's interesting too, there's got to be something in the psychology of it all, of him changing his name, right? That's got to be something weird too, right? Where he's
That's funny. I was just thinking about that.
into a mold.
Weird that you say that.
Especially choosing the name David, right? Like, it has such biblical significance.
Yeah.
Like David and
Vernon.
Goliath, yeah.
Exactly.
Dogs.
But I was just going to say, like, Vernon, not a cult leader. David
No.
Koresh,
No.
cult leader.
It's so interesting too, because I think he had to have at least, like, I've got to agree with Nora, he at least had to have some idea of an intentionality in how he was twisting. I don't necessarily know that he's a master manipulator by any means. I mean, he admitted himself he wasn't the smartest tool in the box. But
yeah, oh yeah, he's had a
there's this quote that I highlighted that Sheila Martin said. It's on page 41. And the page before that, it's quoting Koresh himself. Don't look at me, look at the word, he said. That's where you'll find peace, guidance, and your salvation. And then Sheila Martin goes on to say at the bottom of the next page, David read Mark's letters aloud, Sheila Martin says. He'd ask us, is Mark right? I mean, how do you know I'm not deceiving you right now? He wanted us to make up our own minds. And that to me is where he started twisting things and where it's very powerful, because he's giving them the illusion of control and choice and free will where it actually really matters to them, which is in the beliefs of the church and in the beliefs of the word of God. And then he's controlling every other aspect of their lives. Like, husbands can't sleep in the same rooms or beds as their wives anymore. The only people who get to have sex with the women is David. And then things like, you know, meal times, like everything is so regimented. You can't smoke, you can't drink unless he says so. And everything else is super controlled. But he's like, but make up your own mind about the scripture. It kind of, it gives you buy-in, right? Because you're like, oh, he wants me to think for myself in the places where it matters. And that keeps people, the mentality of that, it's a subtle manipulation, but it's coercive control at the end of the day.
And like, you know, literally giving people two options, and very religious people two options. Walk away from God, or stay here where I can help you reach salvation or whatever. Like, any religious person is going to shit their pants and probably stay put. Like, that is such an ultimatum to have to give people, and to scare them in that way of, you know, well, I didn't say it. Don't listen to me. It was, you know, the big guy upstairs. That's crazy.
But you also don't do that by accident either.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely thought through. Alyssa, any thoughts on that one?
It's tricky because at the end of the day, for me, the thought that I keep coming back to is, why do my cats fight every single time I unmute my camera?
Peaches, no.
But at the end of the day, it's like, whether or not he really believed it or whether or not it was manipulation, like, we still ended up here.
Yeah, totally.
And I feel like we would have ended up here no matter what his motives were. And that's the sad thing to think about.
Well, I'm curious too what would have happened if if they had actually given him the time to finish writing the Seven Seals shit that he was working on. When nothing happened afterwards, I'm curious how they would have twisted it again next, because we see that a lot in cults where their leader, I'm gonna make up a name, we'll just call him Donald Trump. Where like a leader will like make shit up, right? And the followers can still somehow find a way to like sneak out of it, right? So like if David Koresh finished writing everything, somebody at the Charlotte meeting today pointed out he probably would have died before finishing it, right? Because the dude was just rubbing garlic on gun wounds. Like if he would have finished it and nothing happened, they still somehow would have found a way, like, oh well, it just the sun wasn't in the right place, like, you know,
They're moving the
ATF was
goalposts
still
for sure.
shooting it. Thank you, that's the perfect way to put it, just continuously moving those goalposts. Which is actually, that's something I was going to bring up earlier. So thank you, Alyssa, for helping me segue back into that previous thought. Tam, any thoughts? Are you done, Alyssa, by the way? Did I cut you off? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. I definitely believe that he totally thought that he was the Messiah. Like he believed everything that he was saying. And yeah, the crazy coincidence of just like Babylon being at their front door, right?
Right.
Because that he had been saying for how long, oh yeah, the government is gonna, you know, shoot at us, whatever. They end up doing it. But I think that like, I think it like his charisma got him as far as like a bunch of these people following him, and then he's like, oh okay, yeah, and then like so he's like, okay, people will follow me, and I think he kind of like got hooked on that power, and that's where, you know, the whole like, oh, you can't sleep with your wives but I can, and like all the rules like came from like that. I thought it was interesting. I highlighted on page 31 where David Thibodeau says, were we a cult? I don't like the C word, but I can tell you that we were inspired. Can you imagine what that feels like? How good it feels to have a purpose in life. So like, I think that is like my whole thing about like religious fanaticism getting this far, right? It's because like that was their whole purpose. Like David gave these people purpose for their life, something to believe in. We know from you know, other cults that, you know, people are searching for a sense of belonging when they fall into these things. And so it's just, but like I said before, like a little bit earlier, like you can use your religion to justify just about anything if God tells you to, you know. So
right,
I think it was both.
David Thibodeau is also very opinionated of the current administration too. I don't know if you guys.
I was so surprised to learn that. Like I'm waiting for like the chance to talk about that, because I was like, well, wow.
He was like, he made the joke, and was it in the book? I can't remember, where David Thibodeau was like, and you guys thought, because obviously the Trump rallies were happening in Waco.
Yeah.
And he was like, you thought we followed the wrong guy? Like, it's all about perspective, right? I mean, like, you have somebody like David Thibodeau in the position that he's in, or, you know, just somebody who's like looking to join a band, like, shit, let's join a band. And then the lead singer just happens to be this guy who's very familiar with a book that you just like didn't even really know about, like the Bible. What's that? Oh, he's like a genius. And suddenly, next thing you know, you're 51 days deep into a siege, and you're like, how did we get here? You know, like it's so freaking easy for us in any cult, any religion, any group. Book club can be considered a cult. For us to like look in from the outside and judge these people, like, why would you run back into a burning building? Because it was either the unknown or God. Like, how are you but that's not like a, you know. So,
and then the other thing, this was their home.
This was their home.
It was their home, right? Think about, you're not in a cult, but you're in your house, right? And
yeah,
who here would not run back into a burning building to get something or someone they loved dearly? Right? No. I'd be back in this house so quick to get Bo.
No
right? Moms and dads getting their kids. Like, it's different if you take a bank hostage and rob a bank and you have one goal, you want to get out with the money, right?
Yeah.
This is where you live, right? And I think that whole element really adds to this whole situation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new Waco pastor is a big QAnon and Trump follower. Yeah, if you go in now, which you can go, hang out with the Branch Davidians if you so please or so would like to.
You can go to their you can go to their stupid long.
Yeah. It's a weird. I went to Waco. I was driving from LA to
Their stupid long. You
was going from actually you put that in the Discord. I couldn't find it. What is the URL? You said it was funny, but I couldn't find the one you were talking about. I missed that entirely.
Oh, let me go. It's like Waco Branch Davidian something info.
Right. It's really long.
So I went to because my sister, of course, loves Chip and Joanna Gaines. So they were like, we're gonna go to Waco to look at the silos. And I was like, hey, while we're there, can we go out to the middle of nowhere really quick? But unfortunately, there was a massive storm while I was there. I think we were getting notifications on our phones about tornado warning stuff. So I was having a blast, of course. And we get there and the gates are closed and they keep it closed for bad weather. So I didn't get to actually go in, probably for the best. But this was 2021. So, but yeah. And the whole Alex Jones stuff, I had no idea about that. I had no idea that the reason there is a building there now is because of Alex Jones. Ugh.
The URL, the full URL, by the way, I found it. Waco, the Branch Davidian prophecies fulfilled.info.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
So easy to remember.
Because I saw your comment about
You'll
that.
never forget it.
I found one of a Branch Davidian's website where it was just like a couple letters, and I was like, that's not very long. There is a website about the Branch Davidians where you can listen to some of David Koresh's teachings. I don't know, maybe it's my lack of attention span. The guy wasn't that interesting, but maybe it's just because I really don't care what he has to say. And of course, hindsight's 2020. And again, here's me judging, looking on the outside end of cults. And it brings me back to Cultish, which we read in 2022, which is like such a fulcrum of this book club when we talk about cults. It's like, hey, have you read Cultish? Go back to Cultish. It's by Amanda Montell. The language and fanaticism of cults. It really helps you put into perspective why people join cults and how the word cult has this connotation of like, you know, oh, that means 900 people. Like if you're in a cult, that means, 900 people are going to drink the off-brand Kool-Aid. Oh, suddenly tanks are going to be at your door. But I think there's so much. It's actually such a lighter phrase than we realize, because like I was joking, book club can be considered a cult. Like CrossFit is considered a cult, which is something that Amanda Montell brings up. So he wasn't a good speaker.
I have a question for Alyssa. So the event is known as Waco, but is Mount Carmel technically in the city limits of Waco?
I think so. I don't know specifically because I live in North Texas, like up closer to, I'm in Fort Worth. So I'm only ever in Waco in passing. So I don't know too much of the area, but I believe it's at least I know it's in the same county, and I know it's close enough to Waco proper because it didn't take us long to get there when we were on our way there.
I ask because why is it known as Waco and not Mount Carmel? Every time I get back into Waco and they start talking about Mount Carmel, I'm like, oh, right. The compound had a name and it wasn't Waco. So yet the event is known as Waco.
That is fascinating though, because it actually is in the town of Axtell, Axtell in McLennan County, Texas.
Axtell doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as Waco.
Yeah, that one's actually hard to say. Am I saying it right? It's like one of those towns in the South where it's actually pronounced like Still, something like that.
Oh, that's like in down in that area. There's Bexar County, but it's spelled Bexar.
Precisely. And it was named Mount Carmel, or Mount Carmel, however you say it, after the biblical mountain, Mount Carmel in Israel. So, but it is interesting. Why do we call it Waco? I guess it's just easier to say, but poor people it sucks for the people that actually live there.
You mentioned the Gaines. Waco for two reasons: this event and them.
Or Baylor.
And it's a clear generational distinction, right? You can tell when someone was born based on when I say Waco, what do you think of?
Yeah, very true. Very true. But also, I think it's actually, Sarah, I think it's more than 13 miles. I think it's like up to 20 miles outside of technically Waco. But I mean, it might be one of those weird things where the mailing address is actually
I just remember, like, it was like, almost 10 years ago that I went. So like my memory might not be reliable. I just remember it didn't take us long to get there from 35, the highway. And, it wasn't super far away, but it was
Does
just,
anybody, sorry, Alyssa, I cut you off.
oh, you're good.
Does anybody still talk about it at all? Like, is it ever like brought up in conversation normally?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's, it's a big part of Texas history.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, we've got that. We've got the, was it UT where that other shooting was?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
sad that at this point
in Austin,
In Austin, yeah.
around the time of, well, there was one in a Texas university around the time of Kent State, and then there was the more modern one.
It was the tower shooting in 1966.
The random stuff I can pull out of amazes me sometimes.
Somebody on
Yeah.
Instagram was asking what book we're discussing, and that actually reminds me I probably should start putting something at the bottom. Should I put like Waco at the bottom or something? Like maybe I should have had like I need to add like a banner at the top or something that says like discussing Waco Rising.
Hey Patches, someone in the chat mentioned how David's mother died. That was something
Yeah.
I didn't know. Did anyone else
Mhm.
know that?
I didn't know.
What?
She was murdered by her sister.
I
Her
think somebody
sister
else
was
talking
mentally
when this-
ill, right? And they were going to a doctor's
Oh.
appointment. And she was the
Yeah.
caregiver of the mentally ill sister.
That's crazy.
Was that in the book? I have a vague memory of that.
It was towards the
Yeah.
end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember that now.
It was like when the author was wrapping up like what happened to everybody, where the people who are alive are now. So yeah.
I feel, given the conversation we just had about what his mental health looked like, that would be a more known fact, because mental health can run in the family.
Yes. I'm only laughing, not at you, Kate, but the poor Kate was having a hard time. It's Korean, and then Korean, and then Koresh.
My phone does that all the
It just made
time.
me laugh. Sorry, I was looking at it. And I feel your struggle, Kate. Yeah, Alyssa, do you see any? Well, I guess it's probably not just specific to Texas, but do you see any T-shirts that say shit like this still? Like I support.
I mean, I live right next. Let me put it this way: I live next to a Christian university.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
And there's all sorts of like, "Don't tread on me," and "Come and take it," and all that good stuff. And that is what I sound like when I'm not neutralizing my accent, by the way.
I was like,
that was just
okay,
me letting
accent coming
myself
in.
set myself free.
Hiding for my life. Oh, poor Kate. I feel you.
But I've never seen I support the ATF shirt, but I have seen people. Wow, my hair is doing some crazy shit. I look like I have horns. I've seen like NRA shirts and stickers and all sorts of, oh boy. Yeah, we are. It is red. It's red down here.
Fly. Speak your true voice.
Oh, you start getting me talking about tomatoes. Get me to say the word "oil."
Oh, yeah. And when I moved to LA, that was actually one of the first things that somebody said to me, because my accent's not very thick. I don't think people would be able to discern where I'm at. But somebody did mention that to me. They were, because I was always answering the phone. I was an office PA. I was always answering the phone, and they were like, "You really need to tone down the accent. People are not going to take you seriously." And I was like, "You should hear some of my friends in Valdez, North Carolina. What are you talking about? I sound fine." Whatever. Love your accent, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Speak your true voice. Well, yeah, that's true. It's true. And also, if I'm drunk enough, you can't hear a word I'm saying. That's pretty much all the questions that I had. We've been chatting for an hour and 45 minutes. And I love you guys dearly, but we do have Last of Us episode 3 tonight.
We do.
So, and we've got hockey on. We got the playoffs. I think we've discussed all I wanted to discuss. Is there anything I missed? Please. Don't let me steal the
I
stage. Got it.
just very quickly, I want to point out how it was really fucked up that the FBI just decided to literally terrorize and torture the Branch Davidians by playing like weird, creepy sounds, just like ramming into the. We know this. This is like one of the main things about what happened here, but like just ramming into the building with like the tear gas and the tanks, and just like this is not an assault. That kills me every time because like yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
Are you sure?
Very quickly. Are you sure? Yeah, pretty sure, Alyssa.
And Nancy freaking Sinatra. Yeah, and you know what's also great is what you said, I just thought it was so fucked up that, and I'm like, literally no idea what she's about to say next. It could be anything. Like, this whole book just, it literally.
No, it could have gone a number of ways.
Could have gone a number of ways. Yes, please join the cult of Randy. Yeah, where the hell is Randy? Like, Randy's got to make an appearance at least once in.
I've got 2 cats next to me, and one of them's doing the thing where she's like covering her nose, and it's very.
Oh, everybody has the cutest cats. Well, thank you guys so much for another incredible month and incredible discussion. Kelsey, Nora, Steph, Alyssa, Tam, I love you guys so much. Thank you. Randy, come out. Yeah, Randy's actually the leader of the of the book club. We support Randy's wrongs. I am working on merch for that, by the way. Don't tell anybody. So thank you guys again for your time. Next month we are reading our most requested freaking book for the book club. People have not shut up about Stiff for good reason. It's a great book. So in May we are discussing Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roach. And we will see you on the last Sunday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Anybody in this chat going to be in that live show?
I don't remember.
Tam is?
I am. Yep.
All members are excited to read it. Randy, we really do need you now more than ever. He's great. This book I've read already. However, I will be reading it again. It truly lives up to the ubiquitous hype. It deserves all of the hype. This book is fantastic. It is a good fun time, even though we are talking about cadavers,
bodies,
and I think too, this is a fun entry point. I think to like similar to how I was feeling about gory details, the way that Mary Roach writes is such an approachable way to read morbid nonfiction. This truly is like the blueprint for everything, and I am very excited. I will be chatting with Mary Roach for the podcast. However, it won't be until September. So, in the month of May, I will be releasing a couple of bonus episodes to fill that kind of void in the meantime. Of course, if you are a Patreon member, all the podcast episodes come to you early and ad-free if you would like to support that way. But Mary Roach does have a new book coming out later this year, which feels like a nice companion to Stiff. As Alyssa mentioned, in the chat, and Tori as well. A lot of hype for Fuzz. I've heard that one's great.
It's fun.
I've had it for years at this point, I feel like, and I haven't read it. She has a new book coming out, and I don't have all the details at this moment. I can give it to you, but we will be discussing that just a little bit as well in the podcast episode. So look for the podcast episode with Mary Roach, hopefully in like mid-September. It is coming. However, it will be a little delayed. But yes, and that is May. Am I on the right month? May 25th. May 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We will be here chatting. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We had such a great turnout. I appreciate all of your comments. And of course, I appreciate all my guests, morbidly curious friends here. Thank you so much for your time. It's time to go watch some hockey and some Last of Us. That's an Apple thing I learned, by the way. If you have a MacBook and you start throwing your hands up and doing shit.
It's not doing it. I want it to work.
It's only when you don't want it to.
Hey!
I look so dumb.
I don't have a MacBook, so I can't do this.
Well, it always comes up at the worst times. If you guys don't mind hanging out, I'm going to end the stream, but we're going to chat here afterwards. But thank you guys so much. I think I hit all the points. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I will see you guys in a month. Love you dearly.
Bye.
Bye.